just want to welcome all of you to Shatterproof Challenge, the first time we're here in Stamford. I am here today because my son died of a disease, the disease of addiction. I'm also here today because the whole time he was sick, he suffered in isolation and he felt shame because he had a disease. I'm also here today because as I felt inspired by Brian to start a small charity, I learned 5 facts which changed everything. I learned how pervasive this disease is. 3rd largest cause of death in the United States. I didn't know that. I learned that it's a disease about children. 8 out of 10 who became addicted before their 18th birthday. I didn't know that either. I learned there's a whole body of knowledge that exists that can start saving lives tomorrow. But it's mostly stuck in academic journals. It's not out in our communities. And then I asked myself why. The 4th thing I learned was that for every major disease in this country, there's one well-funded national organization that does 3 things really well. Private research, advocates for changes in public policies, and gets information that's known to work out in our communities. And I learned that nothing like that existed for addiction. And the 5th thing I learned was this was the right time to form this organization for addiction. Healthcare reform was moving addiction and mental health into our healthcare system. It was the right time to form this organization. So that's why I am here today. And with these 4 or 5 facts, the vision of a small local charity turned into a large national organization. A large national organization where millions of Americans are united together within our cause and empowered to create change. That's why I am here. And the question is, why are we all here? We're all here today to begin to talk about it, to raise the voice related to addiction. And as I just said, to unite us together. Millions of Americans united around this cause and empowered to create change. To reduce the number of people who have this disease, the number of people who die from this disease, and the cost to our society of this disease. And equally important, no American should ever have to struggle in isolation and feel ashamed because they have a disease. So with that, I'm honored here to be standing next to these 3 gentlemen. Excuse me. I'd like to first introduce Congressman Himes. Jim Himes. Jim has represented our district since 2009 for 5 years. He has fought hard while in office for our veterans, including legislation that has provided for millions of our servicemen to be given confidential screening for mental health. We applaud his work for mental health. And we really applaud the fact that Jim is the first U.S. congressman to ever repel Shatterproof. And what he's doing with that is bringing a voice to this cause. So thank you very much. I'm going to turn this over to Jim for a few minutes. Thank you,
Gary, thank you. Thank you all for being here on this morning to show your support for this terribly important issue. You're looking at a mayor, a senator, a congressman, and the CEO of a terribly important effort, but we're not here because we're elected officials. We are also all fathers of children. And none of us, except for Gary, can imagine the horror of losing a child and feeling like the resources, like the support, like the backup just wasn't there. That's a situation that has to change. And Gary could have gone a lot of different ways after a tragedy that most of us can't begin to imagine. But he chose instead to say, I'm going to fix this. so that people don't feel isolated, so they don't feel like there aren't the resources out there. And for that, and I know I speak for the fathers up here, we would do anything. Now it turns out you got to be a little careful when you use words like "we would do anything." Dressed like this and going off the edge of a building. By the way, just for the record, I heard the senator. I saw my good friend Dick Blumenthal as we came down, and he said next year we do a threesome. So I want to just say thank you for showing your support, for joining part of the effort that Gary, against all odds and against unimaginable mental and psychological obstacles, has started. Because, again, as a father, this is a condition, this is a disease that must end. And we just can't do enough to move in that direction. Gary, God bless you, and thank you for all your good work.
I'm now honored to introduce one of our two senators from the state of Connecticut, Senator Blumenthal. Senator Richard Blumenthal has been a leader in mental health issues in this country and has fought very hard against big tobacco to protect our children from becoming addicted. This spring, he led, along with other legislators in Connecticut, a task force that came out with proposals to combat the heroin epidemic in this state. We applaud Senator for taking the lead on that issue. And we also applaud him for, as Jim said, saying next year it's a threesome. So we will have our first U.S. Senator repelling as late as next year, but possibly early next year when we're down in Washington, D.C. So with that, I'm honored to introduce our Senator Richard Blumenthal.
There is very little I can add to match the eloquence of Gary and Jim. And, you know, there's an old saying that a picture's worth 1,000 words. The picture of Gary and Jim coming down that building is certainly worth many thousands of words. And I am grateful to them for showing us the way today. But most important, really grateful to Gary. You know, Brian wrote Gary a note, and you probably know about it, when he was about 5 or 6. It said, "To me, you're all that matters." That's something that we say to every one of our children, and we hope that in their hearts, every one of our children would say that about us. There is a bond with our children that is unbreakable and unshakable, even in death. For Gary to face addiction and mental illness took unspeakable courage. A lot of us would be tempted to basically hide, to deny it, to dismiss it, and live through it some other way. And that is unfortunately what our society does a lot, to deny it, to dismiss it, to live through it. What we've done in this organization and others like it is to make sure that people use the resources that can be made available and to make available more resources. I fought very hard when I was Attorney General and then afterward in the Senate to make sure that mental health parity, which is now the law, becomes truly effective. Mental health parity means parity. Physical and mental illness ought to be treated as the same kind of illness. Both affect people, and both can be a source of really fatal consequences. So, Shatterproof is a big deal in making sure that people take advantage of the resources that are now available. Mental health parity means insurance will cover mental health treatment so that people like Brian can get the help they need rather than remain isolated and alone, and perhaps ashamed. There is nothing to be ashamed about in having a mental illness. In fact, the majority of Americans could use some treatment. And I will guarantee the vast majority of members of the United States Congress. But really, it's not a joke, because we all live through life change.